Hello, you're watching the CNBC Conversation. I am Godfrey Mutizwa. Today we are speaking to a man who holds some records. I don't know if he knows his records. I'm going to relay them to him. I'm joined though in this conversation by my colleague Fifi Peters, live from your headquarters in the west of Johannesburg. Fifi, welcome to the program this morning. Mr. Nene, of course, for many South Africans is going to hold that one unique place, the only South African finance minister to have walked off the job. This isn't the democratic era I'm talking about. I'm not too sure about the goings in and outs during the apartheid years. We are also talking about a man who twice held the job of finance minister, and a man who also went out with his reputation high in the sky because he walked on principle. He joins us to talk about life after politics and farming in KwaZulu Natal. Mr. Nene, thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you for having me, and a good morning to you and the viewers of CNBC, Godfrey and Pipi.
I wanted to know what a retired finance minister does.
Well, it's simple. You just drift back into normal life. Normal life is not a difficult space to be in, because that's what I continued to be actually even during my life as Minister of Finance. I would always retreat back to the farm almost every time I had a minute to be able to do that, to gain some sanity because of the enormous responsibility that came with the position. But also, being closer to nature, because I love animals, I love nature itself. So it is very therapeutic, and it keeps you very much in sound spirits.
Yeah, I love the guy also who's behind you, and I wanted to know his name. Is that one of your own produce?
His name is Ringo. It was, given to me as a gift, and I really love it. It's one of the bulls that was painted by a lady in the area here who is very good at painting.
Mr. Nene, I'd like to know, what is it about finance ministers and farming? Because your successor, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, also a lover of farming and agriculture. Perhaps you guys are in a secret that the rest of us don't know.
But I think it's only
my
coincidental that
you around
both
life...
Mr. Mboweni and myself, find ourselves both in the space of farming and of finance as well. But I think for me, it was more about my upbringing. Grew up in a rural area where my parents were subsistence farmers. And I just loved the environment. I never let go of it. So when an opportunity presented itself, for me to purchase a very small plot, it's actually not a very big farm. It's about 22 hectares, but we do a little bit of everything. So I think for me, it was more about my upbringing. And I really don't know about Tito, but he also has great love for farming. Even when he was governor of the central bank, farming was very close to his heart. In Mahubas Kloof in Limpopo, right. He owns quite an establishment, which is quite bigger than mine.
Minister Nene, I'm probably going to ask you, what I think is probably the most important question in this interview, and it's how are you keeping fit nowadays? Because I know you're not going to the gym, because I'm not going to the gym, and I'm not bumping into you at the gym anymore because of the COVID-19 lockdowns that have closed the gym. So how are you keeping fit?
Well, firstly, the farm itself keeps you almost very active. You wake up very early. But again, I actually ended up with my small gym at home. I've got a small treadmill, one elliptical bike, a few weights, workbench, and I do that quite often, but not as often as I would love to, because, of course, because of my age, cold weather and the threat of the pandemic keeps me away from exposing myself too much. But I've got a small gym, both in my bathroom and in my veranda. at home.
I was actually going to say as well, God's own gym that he provided to us free of charge is, of course, a better one to use in this time.
Yeah.
I want to get away from the comfort of the farm. Do you delve back into politics at all? Are you still a member of the African National Congress?
Yes, I am still a member of the African National Congress, but my participation in the structures is very limited because, as I said, I spend a lot of time in the farm, but now with lockdown, because I also sit in a few boards. I chair a supervisory board of a company, Dutch-based company, which invests in banks in Africa. It's called Arise BV, headquartered in the Netherlands. I used to travel a lot to the Netherlands. I now can't because of the situation, but we hold a lot of meetings virtually. So being at the shop, as I said, we also we run a small retail shop that deals with in agricultural supplies, fertilizers, seed, animal feed, seedlings, and protective clothing, and all sorts of things. So I actually get myself very much busy at the shop as well. So my participation in the structures is a bit limited. I also serve as the chair of a company involved in catering. It used to be Campus Group South Africa. It's now Impact. And I also sit as a non-executive director at a small bank, which used to be the Bank of Athens, now called Grow Bank, which was bought by Afgri and Fairfax and the PIC.
Yeah.
So I've got my hands a bit full, and I do a lot of community work as well when I do have a bit of time. Well, I give a bit of my time to the community as well, serving in a small organization that looks after early childhood development.
Yeah.
And so I've got my hands full. For an old man, I think that's enough.
Well, it does sound like it's enough, but I'm seeing a hole here, and I want to make clear, though, right at the outset of the next set of questions, that this is in no way meant to put you in a position where you are critiquing the minister who came in after you. But my question has got to be, so we've got this brain trust that we created in you, where we elevated you to the position that you became as finance minister. And then after that, we discard you and the thoughts and the lessons that you learned in the job. You're not in any way involved in perhaps advising the current minister?
Look, of course, we do have conversations from time to time with guys at the Treasury and the minister himself. From time to time, we have
structured
conversations. But we have an unwritten convention in that office. Started way back when I came into office as a deputy minister and later as minister. That we try as much as possible not to be found to be trying to rule from the grave, because you do not want to put the current minister in a position where he either has to take your advice or not to take your advice at his peril, or take your advice at his peril also. So you would find that Minister Manuel never commented about the happenings in the ministry when Minister Gordon was in, and when I was there, Minister Gordon never commented. And when I left office, I made sure that I actually stay away from any public engagement with that office, other than when I really engage with him in our private capacity.
Mr. Nene, I'd like to take you back to 2008 when you were Deputy Finance Minister, and then the world was embarking on a crisis, and that was the global financial crisis, which you were part of the team that steered South Africa to. Now you are facing the... you ready? So now you are facing the COVID-19 meltdown, but of course you are on the other side of the fence, outside of government. I'd like your view of both crisis and your experience. How do the two compare in your view?
Look, the difficulty here is when you try to compare the two, it is a bit of, I mean, there is a bit of an unfair comparison here. You know, when I came into office, let me relate one story, and I hope it doesn't take you away from your question. But when I came into office and I had a conversation with Trevor privately, Trevor Manuel, who was the first minister in the democratic dispensation, he said to me, he said two things to me. He said, one, you know, I think that some people don't know when to take up their jobs, and some people know exactly when to leave their jobs. And he was saying to me that when he left his job, it was the right time for him to leave. But then he then said, when I said to him, you know, the challenges, I think the challenges are just almost the same as they were when you came into a democratic dispensation, coming out of a situation where the economy was really struggling. High inflation, unemployment on the rise, because it's only then that we started getting statistics of unemployment of all the population groups, but also a huge fiscal deficit that the country was experiencing, and high debt levels. And he said to me, look, your challenges now are much bigger than those challenges. So I think it's the challenges of the time are always reflective of the current situation. When the pandemic hit the country and the world, we were already, you know, facing a very tough economic situation as a country and many other developing economies. So the pandemic actually just complicated the situation. And back in 2008, we were actually, suffering from a global situation, economic challenges, but not complicated by a natural disaster, so to speak, like the one we have this time around. So I think challenges are much more complex now than they were back then. Not that they were not difficult then, but they were a challenge of the time. And I think the solutions are just as difficult, because finding a solution in an environment where you're trying to, you know, fix an aeroplane whilst flying is very difficult. I really don't envy the leadership. And of course, we are all in this together. Yeah. But I don't envy the leadership that have to make decisions, some of them very unpalatable, and that we as a country need to actually give them all the support they need.
Yeah. And I've got to add, Mr. Nene, that some of the challenges are also challenges that we have had for a very long time. You walked on principle out of a very important as well as a key function in government. And yet, here we are. How many years later, we are sitting here talking about the same sort of challenges within leadership. I mean, just yesterday, we had the spokesperson for the president resigning from her responsibilities. I think she is taking leave. I think that's the way that it was put. Do you get the sense, I just wanted your thoughts, do you get the sense that in terms of understanding public accountability, we are regressing? We're not in any way finding the traction that was required out perhaps of the example that you set when you left a job that you were not fired from. We have seen this in the private sector. We have seen this in the public sector.
Look, I think we're in a very difficult situation where our conduct and behavior and the way we respond to some of the challenges that we confront will define who we are as a nation. And we are not wired the same. Some people will fight to the bitter end and hope that would actually, protect their integrity. And some of us would actually opt for, I would imagine, a very difficult route, but some people would think is an easier escape, where you say, look, I'm out of here. But it is indeed a point where you have to decide whether the organization you serve and the institution you serve is not greater than you, And in order for that to remain intact, it is better for you to step out, but also continue to support the cause. So, and there would be those of us that would actually want to, defend their own skin rather than defend the institution they serve and the people that they serve. So as a country, I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I was suggesting that your sacrifice was in vain, because you set an example, a very high standard that we haven't seen taken up either in the public or in the private sector.
Well, I wouldn't, I don't want to take credit and think that what I was doing was to actually set an example. I think it is something that I consciously felt that it is the right thing to do. And I really, was at peace with myself after that. And I actually wouldn't expect anybody to, to do as I did, because we're not wired the same, as I said. But it wasn't from my side, it wasn't an intended contribution to actually demonstrate to people, what the right way of doing things would be. But I still strongly believe that these organizations we serve and the institutions we serve and the people who put us in those positions are much, much, greater than us as individuals.
Yet, staying on this point, Mr. Nene, a lot of your cadres that you served with in government that have come out on the headlines and have seemed to be wanting in their positions are choosing to do the exact opposite, saving their skins instead of saving the integrity of the institution, as it were. And I just want to speak about the issue of accountability and how we get it right here in South Africa, because for many, the lack of accountability is holding us back on so many fronts, particularly economically. I want to know, in your view, I mean, should we just leave it on the individuals to stand up and do the right thing as you did when you recognized the error of your ways and you fell on your sword? Or does accountability need to come from a stronger force? Does it need to come from the top, from the president himself, showing that he is serious about, clean and good governance, and also making sure that it is enforced in South Africa's political and government system? What's your take?
Look, I think without saying that we should leave it to the individuals, or I would hazard to say that it is both sides of the coin that actually need to be seen to be, shining. Coming from the top, yes, but also we have systems and institutions in place to safeguard the integrity of our democratic order. Those must also be seen to be implemented to to the fullest. But of course, I think we all have a role. Society itself needs to hold its elected officials accountable. Of course, from the leadership, from the top, yes, we expect that as well. But it would be unfair to leave it in the hands of the leader at the top only, without society playing its role, but also with individuals not being held responsible for their actions or inactions. And with the institutions also that have been put to safeguard this democracy to operate. I actually, one of these days I was paying tribute and sending messages of, to the Office of the Auditor General, where, this office has actually been struggling to actually make sure that there is proper consequence management in government, where officials have been found to be in breach of financial management regulations and all the rules. All of that, it requires the office itself to be active in holding people accountable. But at the same time, there are a number of other stakeholders that should also play their role to make sure that that project is a success.
Yeah. I was going to suggest, Ms. Nene, that perhaps that responsibility lies within your organization, the African National Congress. Now, I don't know the internal workings of the ANC, but I was just thinking off the top of my head, that deployment committee, when it finally says, we are taking your name and we are going to put you in position X, what should be that final instruction that should come with that appointment? Because you can well imagine, you have people who take these positions of responsibility, they go there, and the next thing, what do we see? We see malfeasance. We see a lot of doings that make the organization really stand in a bad light. Is there an opportunity here for the ANC to stand up and say to the people that it is deploying, we are sending you out there. If you go and you soil our name, we will fire you.
Indeed, I think you are right that a structure like that should actually be a very strong one. And I think the ANC had gone a step further in establishing what is called the Integrity Committee, of which the late Babu Nhlanhla, may his soul rest in peace, was a chairperson of. But when you set up those structures, I think we should give those structures the real authority and teeth to be able to actually execute their task of one, we deploy you there. If you do not, if anything happens that is actually of reputational risk to the organization and the country, we will take steps. And I think at times we actually do not see actions in that space where, when people do get out of the way, being dealt with in a way that they should be.
Mr. Nene, of course, I'm sure you'd be aware of the news that came out last night regarding the IMF finally approving the $4.3 billion in emergency funding for COVID-19 to South Africa. And I was looking at what the IMF had to say about that loan, and the authorities there said that, South Africa has committed to ensuring that there's transparency and proper monitoring in the use of these funds, and that these funds actually go to their targeted objectives. I actually tweeted that and was met with quite a lot of skepticism from South Africans who have seen monies being promised in certain areas and being squandered and used in other areas instead. How confident are you that these funds in total that we are getting from all institutions will be used for their intended purpose?
I think we should have a great deal of confidence in the system itself, that the system will actually, take it upon itself to make sure that when you receive funds, those funds, because it's not only IMF funds that must be treated with the greatest of circumspect and caution, in making sure that we also stretch whatever resources we have in a manner that we do more with the little that we have. And I think in a crisis situation, we are even more in a position to be able to do that. But I think the systems, again, as I said, must actually, and well, of course, systems are actually, have got human beings at top. So those people deployed at the top, and I don't envy people that have the responsibility and the duty to ensure that those, but at the same time, because when you take up like the IMF debt, you will ultimately, we were given 25 years to repay at a very low interest rate, but it's not only the IMF, we've also seen the African Development Bank coming to the party, and everybody else, because they trust that South African systems will be better placed to look after such resources. We've also seen the new development bank, which is the BRICS Bank. They've also come to the party. And I think we actually, as a country, we were better placed to be able to receive those resources. And it is upon us that we prove that the confidence that has that we have been afforded by these institutions is not that we live up to what they expect of us.
Bad thing that we've got the IMF policing the monies and how they are going to be spent anyway, never mind the political sensitivities of other people. But you're a farmer and we're not asking any questions about farming. Before you go,
that's very unfair. That's very unfair. I would really love those questions.
I do have one question, and I was just going to ask, what do you think the government ought to be doing? I mean, people are speaking about COVID-19 as a reset opportunity for many economies. And I'm thinking, here we are in South Africa, we've struggled with land reform. Is there an opportunity here for the government to do something different in supporting farmers like yourselves?
Well, indeed, I would imagine that agriculture has the potential to be able to lift the economy. I'm sorry, I just moved the
it's okay now.
Screen. I don't know whether I'm still okay. But agriculture has the potential to lift the economy, especially during this time, because most of the challenges we're confronted with of unemployment, issues of food security, and issues of economic growth itself can better be addressed with agriculture being at the center. As a country, we've relied a lot on precious metals, and I would imagine this is now a wake-up call that not that precious metals are no longer important, but that agriculture is better placed to be able to address some of our economic challenges. And support for particularly small-scale farmers would go a long way in dealing with issues of food security, poverty, unemployment, and self-sustenance in our societies. As I said, because I grew up in a rural area, farming was almost like a way of life, and I think we need to reintroduce that to our people. And I don't see adequate initiatives that are beginning to go down to our people to encourage them that we could actually lift ourselves out of poverty, and if there is no employment, we still have to be able to deal with food security and rural economic development. Because agriculture is also not only at a primary level, even at a secondary level, because if you look at manufacturing, food processing, and all sorts of things, a lot of jobs could be created with a vibrant agricultural sector. And again, if you talk to the tertiary economic sector, bankers and everybody will tell you that the best clients to service are actually farmers, because those people are good at servicing their debt, even though it requires a system that understands exactly how agriculture works. For instance, you need to know when to fund a particular agricultural sector now, or subsector. If you fund sugarcane, you must know when to fund them, because planting season starts at a particular time and ends at a particular time. If a farmer comes and applies for a loan to plant potatoes, and that person gets that loan a month later, you might as well not give that farmer the money, because if he gets the money, he's going to buy himself a nice 4x4, and it won't support agriculture. But if you understand agriculture as a sector, you will know when to fund, you will know when to expect debt servicing, you will know exactly when the returns are going to come.
Absolutely.
So I think it is important for government to begin to understand the sector, but also not to treat it as a primary sector alone, to see how it plays in the entire value chain.
I can see we started off a runaway train and we can't stop it. So definitely this minute, I am seconding you. I'm seconding you to the Agricultural Ministry with immediate effect. Mr. Nene. Thank you for joining us this morning.
In the farming, we now know.
Definitely. We really value your time, and thank you for your insights. We're speaking there to Mr. Nhlanhla Nene, former Finance Minister of South Africa, or I should have gone the other way around. Thank you. I should have said farmer, and Nhlanhla Nene speaking to us from KwaZulu Natal. I hope to be there when Ringo goes. Thank you. Fifi, thank you as always. Good day.
Thanks, Godfrey.
I don't think